data accuracy and why it matters. All right, so why does it matter? It's a pretty simple answer, really. Accurate and complete data results in accurate and timely payments. There is a direct connection between the quality, how correct and how complete the data is, with how quickly we are able to get people paid. And or at all, right? If the data is completely wrong, it might mean you don't get paid at all. But if the data is accurate and complete, it means you will get paid, and you will get paid as quickly as possible. So it really, really does matter. And the truth is, nobody knows your data better than you do. And by you, I'm talking about, in the case of the MLC, I'm talking about our members. We're talking about the people who are either music publishers or publishing administrators, or they are songwriters who are acting as their own publishing administrator, right? If any of those any of those categories apply to you, I'm talking to you. I'm talking about your data about your song, right? Nobody knows that data better than you do. And so we're going to talk today about the importance of it and how to set up those works in our system, and why you take the time to do that correctly. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about something that I think a lot of people may not fully understand, called data matching. And this is something that the MLC is doing all day, every day. We have really smart computer systems and algorithms. We have really smart people helping with this, and we have our members helping with this. And data matching is critical in order to get people paid. And I want to just explain what I mean by that so you can see the importance of the data about your song in the way data matching is. So every month, digital music services, or DSPs, digital service providers, what DSP stands for, digital service providers who operate under this blanket mechanical license that we've talked about in some other webinars, by the way. We're going to use some terminology that, if it's brand new to you, you might want to go back and watch some of the other webinars in this series. So DSPs report usage data to us every month. And what they are reporting to the MLC is actually sound recording usage data. So what DSPs like Spotify and Apple Music, for example, they are reporting to us information about the recordings that are streamed on their services. So they are going to tell us the recording title, they're going to tell us the artist name, and then they have some internal identifiers, like Spotify has its own internal Spotify identifier. Apple Music has its own internal Apple Music identifier. So they must report that data to us every month. And then there's some additional pieces of information that they report to the MLC if they know them. So if that digital service, if Spotify knows the International Standard Reporting Code, the ISRC, then Spotify will also include that in the data that they report to us. And usually they do know the ISRC. And if they know any release identifiers, like let's say that track was on an album, and that album has a UPC number, right? That barcode number, the UPC, or Global Trade Identification number is what it's actually called, or item number, I think. That long number, right? The barcode, if you think about it that way, for the album, if they know that, they report that to us as well. And then some additional information about the song that recording was based on, if they know it. And if they know it, that would include the names of the songwriters, the composers. It might include the IPIs. IPI is short for Interested Party Identifier, if they know that about the writers, which they usually don't. And the International Standard Musical Works Code, that's what an ISWC is. That's a unique identifier that is assigned to songs or musical works. So if a digital music service knows this information, they report that to us as well. So a couple more things about this. One, I'll just make a quick mention. I didn't actually give our webinar queen a heads up on this. On our website, we actually have a whole page that just explains all these different identifiers. If you go to themlc.com/identifiers, you will get straight to that page. So in case you're like, I'm not sure what an ISRC is, I'm not sure what an ISWC is, I'm not sure what an IPI is, That page actually summarizes all that for you. Plus, it's in our frequently asked questions, but we created a whole page just about identifying. So you can check that out. But so let's walk through a bit of an example here of this data. So you've all heard the song Yesterday, maybe by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, really famous song. If you've never heard of it, you should check it out. So there was a song called Yesterday written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. And that was first recorded by the artist called the Beatles. And then it was also recorded by Elvis Presley, Aretha Franklin, Frank Sinatra, and thousands of other recording artists. So what Spotify is reporting to the MLC is the required title, information about the recording. They're going to say the recording is called Yesterday. The artist name for the recording by the Beatles, they're going to tell us the Beatles, right? They have their own internal identifier, and they may know the ISRC for that recording by the Beatles. And maybe they tell us the names of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, or maybe they don't. It depends on whether the service knew that. They usually will not know what John Lennon and Paul McCartney's IPIs are, and they may or may not know that ISWC for that musical work. So we're getting recording information with sometimes also information about musical works. Now imagine that they were reporting streams to us of the Aretha Franklin version of Yesterday. Recording title is Yesterday. Artist name is Aretha Franklin. ISRC will be different than the Beatles because it's a different recording. And again, maybe they tell us John Lennon and Paul McCartney are the writer names. Maybe they know the ISWC. Usually they don't. So that is information coming into MLC. Now, what we do is we work something called matching. We are trying to connect that information about those sound recordings to the musical works in our database, right? We have to take that Yesterday recording by the Beatles and that Yesterday recording by Aretha Franklin and connect that or match that back to that song by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, right? So let's take a look at what information do we have in our database about musical works. And then this is what we're going to show you how to actually set up in just a few minutes. So in our database for that musical work, and by the way, musical work is another term for a song or a composition. Those all mean the same things, and that is separate from the sound recording, right? So for that song or that musical work, the information we require in our database is the work title. In my example, it would be Yesterday. We require the writer's name and their role. And so in this case, we would have John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and probably they would both be characterized as composer author, would be the role that we would most commonly select. Sometimes you separate out both the music from the lyrics. It's fine with us either way. There's a role that you pick, and you'll see that on the screen in a few minutes. But let's just say that they're both just categorized as composer authors. Then we need to know who are the publishers that represent John Lennon and Paul McCartney, right? Who is handling the publishing administration for that songwriter, and what share of the song is that publisher claiming, right? Maybe John and Paul split it 50-50, maybe they split it 75-25. I have no idea off the top of my head. But so for each publisher that's in there, you're going to know which writer it's associated with. This publisher is associated with John Lennon. This publisher is associated with Paul McCartney. And what share of the 100% that there is to divide up between them, how are they dividing up that 100%? So those are required pieces of information in our database in order to save a musical work in our database. Then we have some extra fields there that we encourage everybody to tell us if they know them. So that would be, for example, the writer IPI, right? And the IPI is the publishers. Those are assigned by performing rights organizations like ASCAP and PMI. Again, go check out that identifiers page. We want to know the IPIs if you know them. And if you know the ISWC, we would love for you to tell us that as well. The more data, the better. The more data, the better. The more data helps us do better, faster matching and gets you paid faster. Then additionally, once you set up this information in our database about the musical work, you have the option, and we really strongly encourage you to use this option, to also tell us about sound recordings of that musical work. So for example, if I was Paul McCartney's publisher and I'm setting up this song yesterday and entering my share, all, let's say claims 50% of this. If I'm the publisher and I know there was a recording by the Beatles, there was a recording by Aretha Franklin, there was a recording by Elvis Presley, I can also tell the MLC about all the different recordings that have been made of that musical work. And by that, you're telling us the track title, which is often the same as the song title, but it's not always the same, the name of the artist, and if you know the ISRCs of those recordings, tell us about them as well, right? Knowing this extra information about recordings that have been made of those musical works, that also helps us do matching, helps you get more quickly. So hopefully this slide has been a little bit helpful and eye-opening in understanding the information that gets reported to us by digital music services, and then the information we store in our database about musical works and their related recordings. And you can see how these things are connected, how they are connected. So what I will also tell you is, if you are a songwriter, and let's say you are not handling your own publishing administration anymore, you signed a deal with a publisher, or you signed up with a publishing administrator, or maybe you're based in another country and you've signed up with a mechanical rights organization in that country. That's what we mean by CMO. CMO is short for Collective Rights Management Organization. Take the word rights out of there. Collective Management Organization. And that is like a broad term that we use to describe organizations like the MLC, but also like the performing rights organizations like ASCAP and BMI, and like Sound Exchange, right? All of us are examples of CMOs. We all manage rights and royalties sort of collectively on behalf of millions of creative works. So in other countries, there are mechanical rights societies, a lot like the MLC, but those countries can collect from all over the world. And so if you're watching this and you're based in another country, and maybe you have signed up with a mechanical rights society in your country, the mechanical CMO, in other words, in your country, and you've authorized them to collect your mechanicals from all over the world, then the MLC will pay them and they will pay you, right? So in all those cases, if you're not getting your money directly from the MLC, we're paying somebody who's paying you. We would encourage you to look up your musical works information in a public search. And if you see something that is wrong, you need to say something. You need to then go back to your publisher, go back to your publishing administrator, go back to your mechanical rights society in another country and say, I noticed my song is missing from the MLC's database, or maybe there's something wrong with the data that you're seeing, right? You can see it even if you are not able to update it. Only members of the MLC allowed to make updates to that data of those musical works. But anybody can search a public search, and you can even then create, get a direct link straight to that page. So you could send that in a link to an email to your publisher, your publishing administrator, and say, hey, here's a link to my work on the MLC's database page, something such and such doesn't look right. Can you please get it corrected, right? The other thing I would say for those of you who are really good about data management and you're on top of your works, you're in there, you've got everything squared away, but you have friends who might be songwriters who are also handling it on their own, and you happen to look up their work and you see something wrong, say something, right? Friends don't let friends suffer from bad music initiatives, okay? You need to say something if you see something that's wrong. So just a couple of quick slides before we get into the demonstration. So if you do want to look up information in our public search, it is public, so you don't need a login, anything like that. You can go to our website, themlc.com, and then in the top right, there's a big yellow button that says public search. And then you can search by a whole bunch of different fields. And as I said, once you're looking at a work, up in the top right is a little option to copy the web address for that particular work, so that if you're typing an email with somebody about something, you can point them directly to that information. So definitely check out our public search at any time. It's available 24/7. The other thing that once you do become a member, right? So I'm talking to you if you are a member, or if you now know you need to become a member, By the way, we have a whole nother webinar in this series that explains who should become a member and how to do that. Okay. So go watch that if you need to. But once you become a member, once you've signed up, you're like, I am now a member. You're not done. That's not the end of it. That alone doesn't get you paid. You now need to take power into your own hands and get your works registered. It's so important, or else we cannot pay you. So we have a bunch of different ways you can do this. We're going to talk about these in detail. So this is just my introduction. We have ways that you can register one work at a time on our portal screens. We have ways you can upload a spreadsheet full of data about your musical works. And if you work at a publisher or publishing administrator that has access to some special software, that software, if it can create something called a common works registration file, or a CW file for short, you can generate a CW and send that to us, and we will ingest that into our system. So we sort of have a small, medium, large option, right? Depending on what works best for you. And we're going to walk through how at least a couple of these things work in just a few minutes. Also, just by way of introduction, I want to tell you we have something called the claiming tool. We're going to explain how that works. It makes it really easy to get that musical works data in our database, especially if somebody else has already started setting up a work, right? Maybe you have a co-writer and your co-writer or their publisher has already registered the work and put their claim on it. Now, all you need to do is add your piece of information, right? So sometimes you don't have to start setting up that musical work from scratch. Sometimes there's already some information in our database and you're just adding your information to it. So we're going to explain how that works in just a minute. And then lastly, just as a little heads up, something we're not going to go through in this webinar, but we do have recordings on our YouTube channel that explain how to use this. We have something called a matching tool. So remember I said we have really smart computer algorithms helping us match sound recordings to musical works. We have smart human beings doing that. They work at the MLC. So put the power in the hands of our members who can help make sure that no sound recordings of their musical works remain unmatched. So our members can use something called a matching tool, look through recordings that have been reported to us by those digital services, and even in many cases listen to hear it a little bit, because the song title Yesterday might be a really common, right? So how do you know if that's really a recording of your song Yesterday? Well, in that matching tool, you can generally even press a little play button, hear it, and say, yep, that's a cover record of my song. Click, click, click. MLC, please match that recording to my musical work. So really powerful tool. Again, nobody knows your data better than you do. This will make sure nothing falls through the. So once you learn how to register works, that's we're going to talk about in this webinar. Once you've got that all set, your works are in there. Also use that matching tool to make sure you're not missing out on any money. All right, so I am now going to come out of screen share and bring in one of my colleagues. Raleigh is going to join me from our outstanding customer experience support team. Woo-hoo! Hi, Raleigh, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Sarona?
Awesome. So glad to have you join me here today. So I know you are going to bring your expertise and show everybody how they register musical work so they can see this data in action.
Absolutely. Let's
Right,
get started here. I will share my screen. And Sarona, can you just confirm you can see it?
We are good. I can see it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So when you log in, you are going to see your member here. And just as a little disclaimer, this is all going to be fake data. So this is not anybody's actual member, just for us to demonstrate here. So I'm going to go ahead and log in to this member. And so the first thing that we want to take a look at is the claiming tool. And as Sarona was saying, these are works that are already registered in our database. And the claiming tool is a way to avoid duplicates. So you're just adding your share to a work that already exists instead of creating a duplicate. And that helps us make sure that the works get paid out correctly. So as you see in this left-hand pane over here, you have the claiming tool, and it's going to allow you to search for works. So if I just go ahead and type in a title, and you can also search by writer name, and there are various ways to search for works here. So maybe you have different points of data that you would like to search by. You're going to come down here and click search, and it should pull up a bunch of different works. You know, I put in love, so it's going to pull up a bunch of different generalized works here. But you should be able to find your specific work if it's already registered based on your specific data. So let's take this work for example. You can see here that we have 0% claimed. We have not added our shares to this work yet. So I come in and say, I own 50% of this work. So I want to claim it. So I'm going to click that claim button up there. And this first panel is going to show you the shares that are already registered. So you don't need to touch those, but you're going to come down here and click on Add Publisher. And that's going to allow you to add your own publishing information. So as you can see, my member here is already connected. I'm just going to click add. I don't have to create a publisher or anything like that. And if you have an administrator, this is where you will add that as well. I don't have one for this entity, so it's just going to be the publisher listed. I'm going to come down here and click next. Some people, this might be a little misleading because it says, oh, it's still 0%, but you just need to click the next button and that will allow you to add in your percentage. So you're going to add in 50%. And if you have a represented writer where you want to connect your writer with your publishing entity so that it shows up as, yes, I'm claiming on behalf of this writer. And sometimes that's helpful for other publishers to see. Maybe if there's a conflict down the road, we know which writer you're trying to claim on behalf of. So if you have writers over here, you can just click this link writer. And you'll see this writer shows up as connected to this publisher. Then you will click next. And now you can see our 50% is added here. And you can click claim. And it will make sure that you want to actually claim it. And you click claim. And you can see this green line here, claim submitted successfully. So you should be able to then come over to your registration history and you see that this 50% has been submitted. So that is going to be your first step. Always make sure that you are searching for works that might already exist in the database. If you've done the search and it doesn't show up, then you have two options here. So the first is going to be our individual registration tool. And this, as the name implies, is doing one work at a time, an individual work at a time. And so if you only have a few works, this makes total sense. It won't take you too long. And our second option here is our bulk registration file. So you will be able to actually download this template onto your computer. And we have a whole other webinar that actually goes through the steps of how to fill out the bulk upload. So I won't do that today, but if you are interested in that, definitely check out our other webinar on that. And it will give you instructions. The template itself will tell you what's required, what's not. But let's go back to this individual registration tool here. So you've done the search, nothing's coming up. You can see this create new work button down here. And it's going to ask you if you want to use the wizard or if you want to skip to the form. If it's your first time, maybe second time, I would recommend using this wizard as it's going to be a step-by-step basis on, you know, taking you through each section at a time, so it's not as overwhelming. If you've done it a few times, you can skip to the form itself. And that is going to allow you to essentially edit each of these sections, you know, in whatever order that you want. The wizard is going to take you through each of these sections in order. So let's say I want to come and register this new work. The work title is going to be required. All of this other information is optional, but that being said, if you have this data, please enter it. This is all about data.
Exactly.
Yes.
The more the better.
Yes, the more the better, especially this ISWC, that's going to be super helpful. And then if you have any alternative titles, you can also add that as well. And then you're just going to hit done and you'll see that this title shows up here. You can come in and add writers, kind of similar to the claiming tool. You can link an additional writer if you need. So let's just see.
You might have there.
So, yeah, so you can add this writer, hit next. You'll want to make sure that you choose a writer role. And so there's a bunch of different options there. If you have questions about that, you can reach out to our support team for more information. And then this publisher, obviously, we want to make sure we add our publisher. Same thing, make sure you hit next. That will allow you to enter in the share. If you want to link that writer, go for it. And if you have recordings, you can do that here as well. And you'll be able to hit submit. And it should show up in your registration history. So those are going to be the two ways that I just demonstrated in terms of the claiming tool and the individual registration tool. Like we said, if you have further questions about the bulk registration, make sure to see that other webinar. And then lastly, there are some scenarios where maybe you need to edit a work. So there's a work that's already in your catalog, but maybe you realize, oh, I'm not actually supposed to claim 15%, I'm supposed to claim 10%. So what you can do here is there's an edit button up here in the right-hand corner, and that is going to allow you to edit this information. There are some things that you will not be able to edit. For example, the work title is something that you'll have to reach out to support to in order to make those kinds of updates. But let's say I need to change my percentage from 10% to 15%. So I'm going to come in here, change it to 10%, hit next, and come down here and submit. Again, if there are other things you want to edit, you can do that as well. If there's something where it's pretty obvious that you're not allowed to edit, or there's not a button to edit that specific thing, that's probably a good indication that you need to reach out to support for that specific thing.
We can fix it. So understand,
yes,
we can
yes.
fix it. It can be fixed. It just means that you are not able to update it yourself, at least in this current version of the portal. Maybe in the future, you know, some of these things will become editable. But the key is it can all be fixed, right?
Yes,
it's just
absolutely.
You need to reach out to the support team. And we'll remind you at the end of this webinar the different ways you have to reach out to us. But for some things, you need to have us make that update for you.
Yes, absolutely. All things are fixable. Just depends on whether it's you are able to do it or we need to do it on our end. So you can go and hit submit here. And again, it should show up in your registration history. So that is going to be the three main ways that you can register works as well as edit any works. And as Sarona mentioned, I'll just point out this matching tool here. We won't go over that. There are other resources on how to use that, but just wanted to point that out, that it's under the matching pane right here. And that should be it for how to register works.
Awesome. I just want to share a couple of extra bits of information that I think would be so So really helpful to point out. So two things really, that when you're registering your claim, remember there's a reason you don't enter a share percent for a writer directly, right? Because we pay the party that is paid the music publishing share, all of it, and then they pay the songwriter. So you're putting in that share, that claim share, as associating it with the publishing party, the party that's handling the publishing administration. But one of the things that we love, and I think you're not required to do it, right, Raleigh, but the association of a writer with that particular publisher. So again, pretending I've got yesterday by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, when Paul McCartney's publisher is going in the system and they're entering their claim and they're saying that I am representing Paul McCartney, that is so helpful both for what we do and just for an industry. What you might have never noticed if you looked at a lot of industry databases online, what they often show you is here's all the writers and here's all the publishers, but they don't show you which writer goes with which publisher. So our database does show you that, but that's only there if our members actually put that data in our system, right? So seeing that connection is so helpful to making sure that you can look at that and go, wait, which writer's publisher hasn't shown up and claim their share? It makes it so much more clear what's happening with it. So we really encourage you to do that. I think that's really important. The other thing, when you're coming in first and you're using that claiming tool, if you know you've never, ever registered anything ever with the MLC, and you're trying to find that song, and you put in the work title and your writer, you might not find it, right? Because for your writer name to be on it, it means somebody else has already registered it, put your writer name. Maybe if you don't find it, try and search for your co-writers. Because it may be that when your co-writer first registered it, they beat you to it, right? They got it in there first, which is fine, and they only claimed their share. They only thought to put their writer name on it and forgot to also add yours. Right. So another good way when you're using that claiming tool and you're searching and you want to search by more than just the title, if it's a common title, is if you think maybe your co-writer, they were on top of it, they got the song registered first, search for their name in the writer field. That might help you find it more quickly. It's just little tips and tricks, right? As you do this more and more, you're like, oh, this works. This gets me there faster. So that's also really helpful. And that bulk upload, that's what we refer to basically uploading a spreadsheet. That's what I mentioned before when we talked about spreadsheet. We just call it the bulk upload. All right. So go ahead and come on out of screen share there. One other thing we didn't show the fields for, but that's sound recording information, which was an option at the bottom of your works registration. Just fill in the artist name, the ISRC if you know it. Even if you don't know the ISRC, the artist name is super helpful. So the more information you can tell us about sound recordings of your works, the more likely we are to be able to match it.